Welcome everyone to the NCFCA Online Summit. My name is Amy Joy Tofty, and it is my pleasure to serve as the Director of Education for NCFCA, the leading Christian speech and debate league. Since 2001, NCFCA has empowered Christian students to apply and communicate their worldview with skill and clarity. Through regional and national competitions, supported by exceptional training and curriculum, tens of thousands of students have learned to confidently communicate truth with grace. Thank you for joining us this week for this free online summit. This one-week workshop lays a firm foundation for a variety of speech and debate events. Today, we're focusing in on policy debate, and after 30 minutes of live teaching, we'll give away some great giveaway packs from our friends at the Young America Foundation, and then we'll finish our time together with a live question and answer session. This week is truly just the beginning. We have a great event planned next week as well, so check out ncfca.org/intensive. That event is going to host interactive sessions where students will be able to break out into groups with trained coaches and practice the tools that they've learned here this week. To get the most out of this session, feel free to use the question and answer box to pose your questions to our speakers, and we'll address those at the end. And we will occasionally open the chat box so that you can share your experiences with the speaker as well. If you have technical issues, you can contact summittech@ncfca.org, and we'll help you as quickly as possible. Isaiah 1 verse 18, God invites us into a conversation when he says, "Come now, let us reason together." Debate provides a great way for you as a parent to invite your student into an ongoing conversation as you reason together, applying your biblical worldview to real life issues. In session 11, Parenting a Policy Debater, we've designed this time specifically for parents, and you'll learn how to engage your student, engage in a club, and evaluate policy debate. Our guest speakers today are Brenda Stortz and Christy Shipe. So I'm going to invite them here just so you can get to know them a little bit. Let me tell you about them. Brenda is our Region 10 NCFCA parent of 3 children, and she serves as a team policy debate coach, a club leader, and runs summer debate camps. She's also the co-founder of New England Debate, and this fall, she's going to be starting a new club in Region 10. Christy Shipe is the founder of NCFCA and a Region 9 NCFCA parent of 5 children. Mrs. Shipe authored the NCFCA Comprehensive Guides to Teen Policy Debate and Lincoln Douglas Value Debate, and she currently serves as the NCFCA Board Chair. Ladies, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
Brenda, I understand you're going to get us started.
Thank you, Amy Joy. I'm so excited to be here with everybody. And I just want to share with you how utterly flabbergasted I have been at the ability of NCFCA debate to transform my students' critical thinking skills in a way that nothing else could have. It's also provided this catalyst for ongoing rich discussions and really precious relationships with my children. And I'm really excited to pass on to parents some of what I've learned about parenting policy debaters in NCFCA over the past 5 years. Today, I'm extending to each of you a personal invitation to get the most out of NCFCA debate. Parents, together, we are the essential key to the NCFCA mission. NCFCA is an organization of parents, run by parents, who lock arms together with other like-minded Christian parents in other local clubs, regions, and the nation as a whole, but also even with those parents extending back over 20 years who have generously poured into students and families to train and hone cross-shaped thinking and communication. My prayer for all of us is that we would be actively involved and engaged in Christian debate with our students. Now, I would guess that there are many of you who are entirely enthusiastic about that prospect, but there may be some who are hesitant or perhaps don't feel qualified or maybe aren't particularly interested in immigration policy reform in the European Union. But I suspect that all of us recognize the real and pressing need for respectful civil discourse, the need to hear and honor each other as fellow image bearers, to seek God's opinions and His truth on all life issues, and to communicate them in love effectively. I also think we would agree that parental involvement in school results in higher student achievement, but did you know that higher levels of parental engagement results not only in that higher student achievement, but also in increased teacher and parent satisfaction? What that means for us is that embarking with our students in learning Christian debate will be rewarding for us, and I would add to our families as well. We too will hone our toolbox of skills to engage our culture while building an extraordinary mission-minded community and enjoying purposeful camaraderie as we together minister to students in our clubs, in our regions, and in our nation. Now, before embarking together on this journey, we first need to understand our purpose as parents, and that is to nurture students to use debate as a quest for truth, rather than a tool to manipulate others and elevate self, or to debate to win at all costs. As students explore life issues, they must learn to take all thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ. And that is where they will need help to keep them grounded in Christ. So, what's our first step? Family. Fully invite debate into our family. Make room at dinner table conversations for discussing ideas and evaluating positions. Discussions can be general, or they can be specific to this year's topic. You can discuss current events in general. Discuss current events in the European Union. What is the government structure of America? What is the government structure of the EU? Why is it that way? Ask what students know about immigration in America. What are some problems? And what are the different positions people may hold on them? Are immigration problems similar in the EU? How could the EU fix them? How would that work? Would it be a good idea? Why or why not? Next, you'll want to make room in your students' academics for debate. So when student learning has a relevant purpose, as it does in debate preparation, where competition is on the line and awards at stake, students become often passionate, independent learners, and they take ownership of their own learning. And deep learning happens that wouldn't occur any other way. And that can also be reflected on your student transcripts. Parents can arrange coursework to complement debate and can count debate toward high school credit. English as rhetoric or logic, or social studies such as history, government, civics, or economics. And one of my favorite academic advantages of debate is that it augments almost every other subject area your student is going to encounter. But however you choose to accommodate debate in academics, you will also want to be making room on our family's calendar. And that is to regularly meet other local debaters. Join together with other debate families in an existing club, or band together with some friends on your own. Fully engage in that club to learn with and from other families on how to prepare for tournament competition. You'll want to plan to attend fall practice tournaments and one or more tournaments during the official Ncfca competitive season from January to June. So parents, now that we've invited debate into our families, made room in our students' academics and on our family's calendar, what's our destination? What's the end goal for our students? One hint, it's not awards. Competition and awards are just carrots. It's also not to turn out attorneys or scientists or actresses. Our real mission is to use the field of competition and noble rivalry to train our students to reason and communicate while looking at life issues with the eyes of God's truth. It's preparation for kingdom life and whatever calling God has for our students. That is an important and weighty goal. But what's our role as parents? It's to be our students' coach. By virtue of our own Christian education, we are qualified and able. We may also find ourselves honing our own life skill set. Our role is to embrace learning side by side with our students and to be patient with both ourselves and them. It's to ask questions and give students feedback on case ideas and arguments, to check to make sure they're completing their club assignments. It's to help ground our students in the true and good purpose of debate and to help them remain grounded in Christ. Remember, when parents are engaged, our students grow more prepared for kingdom life. Club, coaches, parents, and families are all more satisfied. Tournaments run smoothly, and a beautiful community is forged. Finally, how do parents get the support we need to begin this journey? You can begin by going to the ncfca.org website and using the Find a Club feature. There you can connect with and join an existing local club, or you can get together with a couple of other interested families and start a new club, as I will be doing this fall. Clubs really provide the joy of local community, and they're the place where we all learn together how to equip ourselves and our students to prepare for the official Ncfca tournament season. To register for tournaments and to receive special affiliate benefits, families will need to affiliate with Ncfca via the website. And speaking of tournaments, they are where everything comes together. There we get to enjoy and extend our community and our impact from our local club out into the our Ncfca region, even beyond that, at national level tournaments into the nation. Judging at tournaments helps crystallize our own learning, makes us better coaches, and gives us opportunities to pour into students across our region. And it's essential to running a tournament. Another 30 minutes would not be enough to tell you of the fruit of our family's 5 years of Ncfca competition. Suffice it to say, all the learning, rejoicing, stressing, laughing, crying, preparing, stumbling, singing, packing, empathizing, planning, late nights, judging, anticipating, highs, lows, friends, and fellowship have all been so very worth it. I hope you'll consider my invitation to link arms with parents both near and far who share the mission of training our students in cross-shaped thinking and communicating, and who enjoy the nationwide community and purposeful camaraderie of Christ followers. So, let's get into the nuts and bolts of getting involved in your child's policy debate education. How do we do this? Well, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 3 different stages of preparing your student for tournaments. So in preparation, and that can begin today, a great way to start is to have discussions about current events around your dinner table, as we talked about. You can ask questions and teach your students how to ask good questions like, but why? How do you know that? How big? How many? Under what conditions? How does it work? And why does that matter? You can also consider some academic classes that will help them in debate, and that would include maybe a logic class. You should also consider a debate curriculum. Ncfca's comprehensive guide to team policy debate would be an excellent start. You can also plan for eventual classes in government, civics, history, and economics. Those will all be super helpful. You can consider summer reading. Perhaps you can help your student consider some books about our resolution topic, learn a little bit about the EU and government. And finally, the most important thing that you can do this summer is to find that local club and get involved with them, or band together to form your own club. There's also the Ncfca Intensive coming up next week, and I highly recommend that you attend that with your student and just join in their workshops. Now we come up to September through December. This is considered the preseason for Ncfca, and this is where you'll want to help your student to begin broad background research in the resolution. You can also think about discussing your own life experiences. This year's resolution is fairly modern history that we've actually all lived through. Help your students discover areas of interest and problems that need to be fixed. You'll want to also set appropriate boundaries. This year's resolution is going to present the potential for some mature content in the resolution. Your student will be searching online and may encounter, probably will encounter some of this mature material. So you'll want to set appropriate boundaries for that online research, as well as boundaries for their collaboration with peers. So you'll want to monitor your students, maybe their Google Hangouts chats, do things like use Google Scholar, and that will help to make sure that your students are staying in areas of the internet that you may deem appropriate. Your student will need to gain computer skills. So you'll want to equip your students with basic file management, online sharing and communication skills. And teams and clubs typically rely on online workspaces like Slack or Google's Drive, Chat, and Hangouts features, or Zoom, as in this call. You want to continue learning together. You'll want to help your student participate in the club research ring, where broad research can be divided up amongst debaters. And then you'll want to talk about potential partnerships. Team policy is not done alone, and so you're going to need to really make a great relationship with another family so that you can organize which tournaments you're going to go to and how you're going to work together. And of course, continue giving that meaningful feedback and plan in the fall to attend a practice tournament, whether online or in person this year, and to consider judging online practice rounds. Now, during the season, from January until June, you'll continue providing that feedback for your student, and your student is probably going to be really coming to you, craving that feedback. Encourage your student to communicate clearly and avoid jargon. If an argument doesn't make sense to you, the student probably doesn't understand it well enough to explain it clearly. Play the part of the opponent and look for logical errors. Check those club assignments for completion. Check for academic integrity and that evidence is properly cited. Next, keep learning. Continue engaging. Learn as much as you can about judging policy debate. Offer your particular gifts of hospitality, administration, tech, or whatever your gift may be to help the club leader as you learn. And finally, judge debate online and at tournaments, support the partnership, and enjoy your own community and camaraderie as we work together to equip the next generation in our mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. That was excellent. I really appreciated everything that Brenda just shared. What I'm going to do now is talk about judging policy debate as a parent. This is one of the big ways that you can be involved in your child's debate education. When you go to a tournament as a family and your child is competing, we ask that you help volunteer at that tournament in some capacity, and that's usually as a judge. And I'm here to tell you, this is my #1 big message. This is what I want you to take away. You can do it. You can judge policy debate. Our philosophy at Ncfca is that students need to learn how to persuade the average adult. So adults that have never debated before, but listen, you're a voter, right? You vote in elections, you make decisions every day, you read the news or watch the news, and you're already deciding what is persuasive to you, who you're going to vote for, other life decisions. We want our students to learn how to persuade you, just an average adult person in America. And therefore, you are perfectly qualified right now to be a debate judge. That's the #1 thing you've got to remember as you walk into a debate round to serve as a judge, is that it is the debater's job to explain their arguments to you. If you're confused about what they're saying, that is not your fault. That is not your fault. It should be clear and understandable. Now, of course, a lot of times we start at age 12, and so you might get a round where it is very confusing. Again, that's not your fault. And that's some helpful feedback that you can give the students, like, I couldn't understand your second point, or the conclusion was confusing, things like that. You can give some written feedback. But I just want to reassure you that just by being an adult who's available and has the time to come sit and listen, you are qualified to judge a round of debate. This is just basic common sense persuasion based on human nature and the way that we already think and the way that we already make decisions. So with that in mind, I want to actually delve into policy debate a little bit more deeply and give you some tools that might be helpful, but ultimately just remember, you're just deciding who is the most persuasive. But I'm going to go through some foundational assumptions of debate theory that might help you to understand what's supposed to be happening in the debate round. The stock issues, we call them stock issues because they are the debater's stock in trade. These are the issues that normally come up in the debate round. And then finally, what to look for, a few things that can help guide you in what to look for. And there, I have prepared for you a voting calculus. It's like a little grid of what to look for. That was shared in the chat box. There's a link at the top of the chat box to the handouts for this session that includes that voting calculus. So you might want to pull that up, especially when I get to that portion where I'm talking about stock issues. But let me start first with foundational assumptions of the debate round. Number one, it starts with the resolution. You heard Brenda talking about that. What is that? It just means the topic of the debate round. So this year's resolution, as Brenda was already talking about, is resolved. The European Union should substantially reform its immigration policy. That's the topic of the debate. So you walk into the debate round with the assumption that's what the debaters are going to be talking about. If you want to hear a little bit more about the approach to debate and how policy debate works, I would encourage you to go watch the recording of the previous session, session 10, preparing for policy debate. That would be helpful. I'm not going to revisit all of that material here, but we will be sending out those recordings and you can listen to that. I'm gonna assume that maybe you've seen that, or you could go back and watch it, and I'm gonna move forward. So we start with that resolution. There's an affirmative team and a negative team. And in general, the affirmative team, which is a team of two debaters, that, as Brenda talked about, your child would have a partner. So there's two affirmative debaters and there's two negative debaters. And in general, the affirmative side is saying, yes, we should reform the European Union's immigration policy. And the negative team is saying, no, we shouldn't reform the EU immigration policy. So one side is arguing yes for reform and presenting a plan to do that, and it's their choice of what aspect of the policy they want to reform. So it's kind of broad. They can choose a particular area. That's the affirmative. And then the negative is going to argue, no, this is generally. Sometimes they argue something different, but most of the time, the negative team is going to say, no, the European Union is already doing fine. It's working well. We don't need to change that part of the immigration policy. So that's where you start off. And then we get to this concept of what's called Fiat Power. And that just has to do with this, just in case you run into that term. It just means that the debate round is not a question of whether or not the European Union would adopt the affirmative team's plan. That's not in question. We're not saying like, oh, the EU would never vote for that. We're going to assume that they do vote for it if you are willing to vote for it. So it's not a question of whether or not the EU would actually do this in real life. It's a question of if the plan is a good idea. So if you think the affirmative team has done enough to show that their plan is a good idea. So that Fiat Power, we give it to the affirmative team to just assume, yes, the EU would pass it. We're not asking that question. We're just asking whether or not the plan is a good idea. Another foundational assumption is the idea of presumption and burden of proof. And this is based on just a common sense idea of persuasion that's been around forever. And that is this statement, he who asserts must prove. He who asserts must prove. So let's just take an example. If I say aliens exist, all right, and you're like, I don't think so. Who has the burden to prove that aliens exist? I do. I made the assertion aliens exist, therefore the burden is on me to prove aliens exist. If I say, well, you can't prove to me that they don't exist. Therefore, they do exist. That is a logical fallacy. That is called an argument from ignorance. Just because something can't be proven false doesn't make it true. So the absence of evidence doesn't make something true. The burden is on me. If I say aliens exist, then I have to prove they exist. You don't have to prove to me that they don't exist. In fact, that would be impossible to do. So how does this relate to debate? So the affirmative team is arguing for change. We need to reform. We need to change. Therefore, they're the ones making the assertion, yes, we need to reform immigration policy in the European Union. So therefore, the burden is on them to prove that. They don't just get up and say, yeah, we should reform, and sit down and, say, prove us wrong. That's not how it works. The burden is on the affirmative team to prove their side of the resolution. Now, if the negative team chooses to just say, no, the European Union is working fine, the policies that we already have are working great, then we say that presumption is in the favor of the negative team. That they're just keeping everything the same. They're not arguing for change. So the way human nature normally works is that we just accept what already exists and resist change. Now, this isn't always true, but this is just one of the theories of debate, that the burden of proof is on the affirmative team because they're making the claim. And if they don't prove their case, then we should vote negative, because the negative is just keeping things the same. And so they don't have that same burden on them. Now, there are some times in a round where the negative will lose presumption if they choose to present their own counter plan. I'm not going to talk about that here. I'm going to say 90% of the debate rounds that you will see, and maybe even higher than that, are going to have an affirmative team arguing to reform and change, and the negative team arguing to keep things the way they are. So that's what you're mostly going to see. Let me just give you an example in real life of how this works, and then I'm going to get into the stock issues, and you're going to see how the stock issues are really related to that burden of proof that's on the affirmative team. So let's say that your kids come to you and they say, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to change the policy, the electronics policy in our home. If you're like me, you have time limits on how much TV your kids can watch, how much tablet, computer. I just call it electronics because there's like a million devices now where they can be online or doing something with electronics. So it's like such and such many minutes for electronics per day. You probably have that kind of policy. So your kids come to you and say, hey, I think you should increase my time, 2 hours a day. So right away, we're starting with presumption is in favor of the policy I already have. I'm presuming in favor of the one I already set. And I'm putting the burden of proof on my child to give me good reasons why I need to change that policy. So here's where we get to stock issues. Now that we've put that burden on the person who's saying, hey, we want to change it. We want to change this policy. All right, I have some questions for you, right? All right, child, I have these questions. And here they are. First of all, why do we need to change the policy? Okay, you got to tell me good reasons why we need to change. Secondly, what's the change going to be, right? How many minutes do you want to change this electronics policy to? Thirdly, is the change really practical? Like, is it going to work? There might be some barriers to that. And fourth, is it worth it? There might be some greater problems created by your idea than they solve. So let me just run that through the electronics policy idea. Why do we need to change the electronics policy? So, maybe your child says, well, I want to play more video games. You're like, no. No, that's not a significant reason for change. And so there's one stock issue that we call significance. And I want to pause here for a second, just say the names of the stock issues really aren't important. Sometimes people get hung up on the language of debate and the labels. Don't get hung up on that. Just know that the big question here is, why do we need to reform? There has to be a compelling reason. We say significance for that. And if your kid just wants to do more video games, I'm guessing you're going to say that's not very significant. So let's say they come up with a more significant reason, like I need more time to do my homework. Then you've got another question there. That's significant. We want them to do their homework, but maybe it's not what we call inherent. Maybe their homework doesn't have to be done online. Maybe there's a different way to solve the problem. You're like, no, you don't need 5 hours a day online just to do your homework. Now, I know I'm speaking in a year of COVID-19, and they may need that amount of time for some people doing school online. But just assuming in a normal case, maybe you don't need an increase of time. You could do your homework on books and notebooks and, you know, the old-fashioned way. So there's that second question of the need of whether or not the change that you're calling for would actually address the real problem, or if there's another way to address the problem. So that second question then is, what's the change going to be? There has to be a plan. So, and in debate, you're going to be hearing a plan from the affirmative team. And if you ask your child what's their plan for, you know, if they say they want to change the policy, then you're going to ask them, what is their plan to change this household policy? Thirdly, will the change work? So I have 5 kids. If each one of them wants 5 hours a day on the one computer that they share, that's not going to work, not enough hours in the day. So you have to evaluate whether or not the plan will work. And finally, is it worth it? Will it create more problems than it solves? Those are the stock issues. And again, the burden is on the affirmative team to answer all of those questions. Now, if you have the voting calculus in front of you, you'll see that in order to vote for the affirmative, the answer has to be yes to every one of those questions. So your questions, you know, did the affirmative affirm the resolution? Yes. Okay, good. We start there. Do we need a reform? Yes. All right, still looking good for affirmative. Did they present a plan to reform? Yes. Okay. Will the plan work? Excellent. And is it worth it? I'm ready to vote affirmative. Now, if the answer to any of those questions is no, generally you're going to vote negative. And I'll tell you why. So if the affirmative team doesn't affirm the resolution, well, then they haven't done their job. That's an easy negative vote. If they don't prove the need for reform, then why would I change from the policy I already have? There's no compelling reason. I'm just going to keep what I have now. If they don't have a plan, why would I vote for that? There's no concrete change. I'm not changing to something that has any plan behind it. Maybe they do have a plan, but it's just impractical. It won't work. Again, that's a vote for negative. And even if they prove, yep, we need the reform, here's our plan, the plan will work, but is it worth it? Maybe there's some significant disadvantages that outweigh the advantages of the affirmative case. I made up a silly example in the policy debate curriculum where it's like, if you knew nuclear weapons would completely destroy all mosquitoes in the world and malaria would never spread again, you know, that's great. That would be, yes, do we need to kill off malaria and solve that problem? Sure, there's a need for reform there. And here's my plan, nuclear bombs. But I think we all know that the disadvantages of using nuclear weapons far, far, far outweigh, you know, just taking care of a mosquito problem. So again, if any of those questions are a no on the affirmative, then typically you would vote for the negative team. So that voting calculus really illustrates how that burden of proof is on the affirmative team. Now, what else are you looking for as a judge? First, let me state a very important principle that goes along with those stock issues that I just went through. You really only want to vote on those stock issues if the other team brings it up. And here's why. The two teams are debating each other. They're not debating you, okay? It's not the affirmative plan versus you. It's the two teams debating each other, and you're deciding which team did the best job debating. So I often sit around hoping that the negative team will bring up one of those issues and show that there's not a need for reform, or the plan won't work, or there's greater disadvantages. But if they don't bring that up, then I don't feel like I can vote on that issue. Because again, they're not debating me, they're debating each other. So that's one of the big principles to carry in as a judge into the round. What you're looking for as well is that you're looking for debaters who present arguments that are supported by good reasons and good evidence with citations. We really want academic integrity here, not just like, well, I saw this on the news yesterday, or I read this a few weeks ago, can't remember where. You want to hear who wrote the article, where was it published, when was it published, and a quote, and good evidence and good logical reasons to support their argumentation. That's what you're looking for. Secondly, you're looking for clear explanations, somebody who just makes sense, who clearly explains their perspective in the round. Thirdly, strong answers and to the questions and objections raised by the other team. You really want to see them engage with one another. Fourth, organization is always a big thing to look for. Somebody who just presents a very organized speech, it's easier to understand, like they've got their points in order. Fifthly, professional behavior. So we don't want to reward rude and abusive kind of people. Sometimes, you know, the adrenaline can get flowing. You are debating, somebody else is opposing you, and that adrenaline can flow. But what you're looking for is professional, kind behavior. Do not reward somebody who's rude and abusive. And finally, like I said before, the team that did the best job debating is who you want to vote for, not necessarily the team that you would personally agree with in real life. So I know that's hard, but we really want to judge their debate skill. Finally, I just want to end with this thought that I've just presented the classic way of viewing policy debate, but ultimately, it just comes down to vote for the team that was the most persuasive to you. So if that's helpful, the material that I gave you, use it. If it's not helpful, just remember, you can do it. Make the decision like you would make any other kinds of decision in life, and vote for the team that was the most persuasive to you.
Christy, thank you so much. I will tell you, I'm learning things even today about this great activity and just ways to think about the round. So I really appreciate you and Brenda taking time to share with us. And I would love to invite to the screen now our Director of Marketing, Mrs. Natalia Rosa, and she has some giveaways for us.
Hello again. We have lots of great questions that I know everyone is anxious to get to. But our giveaways as a short break are provided first by the Young Americans for Freedom Foundation, and they are giving away a swag pack. And we also have Boyce College giving away a swag pack as well. So let me tell you a little bit about these organizations. Boyce College exists to train and equip men and women for a life of ministry in the church and marketplace. At Boyce, you'll experience a distinctly Christian education focused on developing your Christian worldview, discipleship, and mission. And the Young Americas Foundation is committed to ensuring that increasing numbers of young Americans understand and are inspired by the ideas of individual freedom, a strong national defense, free enterprise, and traditional values. And so we're grateful for the giveaways provided by these organizations. Our first giveaway winner is Jesse Mitchell, and our second giveaway winner is Karen Hamilton. So Jesse and Karen, I will put your names in the chat so you can confirm that you're the winner. And then if you can email us at summittech@ncfca.org, we'll make sure that you can claim your prize. Thank you so much for joining today.
Great, and we're going to invite Brenda Stortz back on the screen as we go into our live Q&A. If you do have questions, I want to encourage you, you can continue to type those in the question answer box and we will answer as many as we have time for today. So ladies, I know that you are both passionate about this activity. I did notice that you talked a lot about family. Now, I understand that this is an activity, a league for students ages 12 to 19. So just tell me a little bit more about how the family gets involved.
Brenda, do you want to take that?
Sure. So the family gets involved by going to tournaments together, by first starting the conversations at home, but then it continues on through club and through tournaments. So I remember the very first time, I think it was about 2 years into our NCFCA time, that I invited my husband to come to a tournament, and he got to judge, and he got to see these students, these amazing students. They will just knock your socks off. And he said, wow, I did not understand what this was all about. And he said, this is us. And I knew from that time forward that the discussions in our home would never quite be the same. Our dinner table, he would be engaging in a very new way, and our home would never be the same. So while competition turns out to be kind of this fun community side of what we're doing, it's really the transformation of the family, helping us to really have, as I said, that cross-shaped thinking and communication, to keep asking those questions and teach our children how to ask the really important questions about underlying assumptions and presumptions that people are making in their arguments and in our civil discourse today.
That's great. Christy, how old was your youngest child when you started your involvement in this activity?
Let's see, I guess well, we adopted when my oldest was 13, so he would have been 2.5. So yeah, so I had 13-year-old competing and down to like a 3-year-old.
Okay.
So, what I did is my oldest daughter had a debate partner with a family of 7 children, and it was our 2 oldest. So we had however many, 10 kids that were all little, and 2 kids that were old enough to go to a tournament. So one of the moms would take the 2 kids to the tournament, and the other mom would stay home with the 10 other younger kids, is how we did it.
Yes. And so now we do, I do want to just clarify for you all that we do ask and require parents or a guardian to attend with their students, because we really want you to be an active part of this activity. But there are great ways that you can partner with other people. I know when I started, I had an infant as well. And so I tag teamed with another mom, and we would take turns. One of us would watch the kids in the family hangout room, and the other one would go and judge rounds, and we would trade off. And the beautiful part about that was you also get to develop fellowship with like-minded families. So that hangout room is quite a place to be. And until you've been there, it's really hard to describe. But I have made some really great friends over the years, and hard to believe now that my youngest is 8, but we brought little kids to tournaments for a lot of years. And the beautiful part about the young children coming is they grow up in this activity. So for so many of our young ones, they never develop the fear of public speaking because they've been around it their whole lives. And I love that aspect. So let's talk a little bit about eligibility. I do want you to know we have a dad who asked, please, can I compete in this league? And I love that enthusiasm. But talk to me a little bit about who is eligible to compete in policy debate.
Sure. So it's really any Christian student age 12 to 19. If there's a certain date, you'll look on the rules on our website. Do you remember what the date is? I can't remember.
Do. So no younger than 12, no older than 18 on September 1st of the competition season.
Okay.
So some of those students will turn 19 during the year, and that's okay, but you have to be 18 on September 1st.
Perfect.
And then just that other aspect of that is that they haven't earned a high school diploma yet. So if you have one of those really super advanced 14-year-olds that's on their way to college, then they would not be eligible. But I want to encourage you to go to the website, and we'll put that link in there in the chat box for you so that you can go through those and make sure that your students are eligible to compete. So let's talk a little bit about choosing, because there's eligibility and then there's wisdom. So Christy, I know we get this question a lot. How do you choose between policy and value debate? What counsel would you give to parents on that?
Well, I would counsel parents to start their children in policy debate generally, especially if they're younger, if they're on the 12-year-old side of things, for sure, policy debate. It's more concrete and easier to understand, even though debate is a challenge for sure. I mean, debate is very natural to human nature, right? I mean, when you disagree with someone, you're essentially exercising the skill of debate. But what makes it complex is a 12-year-old trying to understand European Union immigration policy. So it's, it's the subject matter that kind of makes it complicated, and that's okay. The younger students can just get in there and kind of learn, like the first few years can just be about learning the structure of debate and just what it's like to get up there and speak and ask and answer questions and all of that. They may not know that much about the topic, that's okay. But still, younger students are going to do better with policy because it's very concrete and it's about what's happening in the world. Value debate is very philosophical. So it's based on philosophy. It is like having a discussion with Plato or Aristotle, that kind of stuff. So that's why I recommend value debate for older students in general, typically 16 and up. Of course, there are definitely students who are ready for that earlier. If your student loves philosophy and is always reading philosophers, then I would say jump into value debate. That is where it's at. But typically policy for younger, value for older is what I would recommend.
I love how you delineate there that the policy debate is really about the what and the value debate is about the why. So I think that's another idea just to think about your own particular child. If you have a child that's constantly thinking about the moral reasons underneath those ideas, then they're probably getting close to the place where value is going to be a great option for them. Let's talk about the resolution a little bit, Brenda. How often does the resolution change? And with that, how many different case ideas and those types of things are you talking about students researching?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The resolution, we actually park on that same resolution for the entire season, which means students begin right now learning about the EU, its government structure, problems they're facing in immigration, and potential plans to fix it. They can start doing that right now. And we're going to park on that topic for the entire season, all the way through to June of next year, potentially. And so what we often do in policy debate is, as a club, we'll rely on a research ring to take this topic, which is actually very broad. Potentially, one could have dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of cases within their very specific cases, but they generally kind of break down into maybe 6 or 7 kind of categories, general broad categories. And if you have a club and other teams that you can work together with, there are some great ways to share the burden of that research and to trade your research. So that one team might work on one particular case and another team will work on another case. And then when those cases are finished, we call those negative briefs. They can swap those negative briefs. At your club, you can also spend time just sharing, having different students prepare background on certain parts of that resolution. And that's a great way to, again, divide up that burden, share the information of the entire umbrella, under the umbrella of that entire resolution, and really help students to be able to get that background and that overview. So club is just such a very important part of policy debate, and I really recommend finding those like-minded parents, getting creative, sharing that research, keeping those discussions going on at home, and you'll be absolutely amazed at what your 12-year-old all the way through your 19-year-old will be able to reason and work through at these tournaments and in your home.
I love that. So Christy, I hear that idea of collaboration. So talk to me about, is that presenting someone else's material? Like how do you make sure that you know what's in that brief or that evidence? What counsel would you give to students when they are collaborating with other students?
Yes, our club always does what Brenda just said. We always share all of our research. However, I always counsel the individual debater to make that research their own. You can't, I can't prepare a brief for you on EU policy and hand it to you. You've never read it and you walk into a debate round, you're not going to know what it says or how to use it.
Yes.
So when you share evidence and arguments together, and we do call them briefs, it's like a collection of bits of evidence that kind of go together and form arguments and help support arguments. Those individual debaters have to read those briefs repeatedly. Like just keep reading it, keep talking about it I disagree 100% with what Brenda is saying about talking about it with your
Yes.
family around the dinner table. The more you talk about it, the more the student is going to incorporate that into their mind and have things to say that come to their, right to their mouth to say when they're in the debate round. So you have to read it, and then you also might want to make adjustments. Maybe you're like, that piece of evidence just doesn't really work for me, or these are my 3 favorite pieces, and you might just cut out something else that someone's prepared and kind of rearrange it in an order that makes sense to you. You might supplement it a little bit with other articles that you've read. I also recommend, because these briefs are full of like snips, say a paragraph or a few sentences from an article, the best is if you go back and read that whole article.
Yes.
You really understand the context. But nevertheless, that sharing of evidence is really helpful in policy debate.
So I hear this conversation about these broad policies and lots of research. Is this really then an activity only for elite students who just have that special knack? How do you get into this if you have a 12-year-old who still is building forts in the backyard?
Well, I'll say, I'd like to hear what Brenda says, but I'll just say you can take this activity as far as you want.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just do 12 weeks in the fall, like, hey, we're just going to learn the nuts and bolts. Our curriculum walks through 12 weeks, and you could do that at home, or maybe your school could get it. So you could do a 12-week course, and then we're going to do 1 tournament.
Mm-hmm.
That is still incredibly valuable.
Yes.
You don't have to go crazy and go to 10 tournaments a year. But then if your student is like, oh my goodness, I love this, this is my passion, then you can really start to dig deeper. But I would still recommend it. Even think of it as kind of like a speech class that you probably took in high school or maybe college. It's still very valuable as a semester course that culminates with, say, 1 tournament or practice tournament. Would you add anything, Brenda?
Say I entered Ncfca with a 16-year-old student who was so gung-ho, and I was the reluctant parent, believe it or not. So he approached it very differently, and I followed him into this whole thing, and my eyes just opened when I discovered Christian debate, because I had debate used against me as a weapon as I was growing up. That was not a good experience. But entering it is with my 12-year-old daughter last year was a very different experience, and the skills she's building are absolutely tremendous. She's just peeling back the layers of the onion skin, and getting deeper and deeper. But her basic skills, she's learning how to listen well. She's learning how to take notes. She's learning how to, navigate, appropriately through documents, and learning how to share documents and how to find arguments. So, the skills that they're building even at 12 and 13 are super valuable skills. She competed with different partners last year, right? So you don't have to have a partner for the entire year. There are a whole variety of ways to approach your partnerships, and there are so many great things that are happening through the entire activity. So it's not necessarily all about the research. The students are learning simultaneously so many important skills that if the first year all they do is learn how to flow, that is, how to take notes during a debate run, that is a great win for that first year. So you don't have to go for the whole shebang the first year.
Yeah.
Let's turn a little bit toward that research. So I know that the debate committee, Christy, put out a really great white paper on the resolution for this year. And for those of you who would like to find that, that is in our resource library on ncfca.org. So go ahead and go there and look that up. But we do have a question about some of those articles because they're several hundred pages long. So how do you recommend that students use that material? Are you really expecting them to read a 100-page document, or how do they skim it to gather the material that they need?
Sure. So you always want to read the beginning. And a lot of times, if it's a scholarly article or it's a report of 100 pages, they've got a summary or like an abstract at the very beginning. You want to read that and decide if that's even worth your time. Like, oh yeah, this sounds like it's on a topic that is going to be valuable to me. Read the beginning and then read the very end. So go to the last page and see what is the conclusion that they draw.
That's
And
great.
then from there, you're going to be scanning through the middle to find the specific details that help support the arguments that you're trying to make.
That's great. And Brenda, you mentioned that you had a younger student who started in this activity. And we know that these are real world issues that sometimes have some intensity into the topics that we're talking about. What counsel would you give to parents on guarding the hearts of their children, even as they're researching real world events?
Yeah, so that is a really fantastic question. And there are lots of different ways that I think we do that. The most important way, right, is just having this ongoing dialogue and taking things right back to God's truth, right? And to look at God's truth in the manifestation of his word and in his person. And so when we compare what we're reading and seeing and understand fallen nature of man in our world, you know, the Bible has a lot to share with us and explain to us in that. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece, I think, is trying to just use great wisdom in how you unleash your student on the internet. And so our students are going to be, talking to each other. This collaboration is a magnificent thing. But parents, you really want to have the wisdom to monitor their chats and see what's going on in those chats. And that goes for if your student is 12 or if they're 18. You want to be monitoring those chats. So I have them go through my phone so I can see when they're chatting and what they're talking about. And that's really critical. The second piece on that is also using things like Google Scholar to help your student to narrow down the kinds of returns that they might be encountering, in addition to whatever maybe accountability or filtering software you might allow on their computer. So I think that's 3 different ways to help protect their hearts.
And I would just add that the topic matter for this year, for example, may bring up issues of the mistreatment of refugees and immigrants. And so there might be some stories. A lot of times, let's say like a newspaper article might start with a harrowing story of something sad or tragic that's happened and then kind of go into the policy issues. So just be aware of that. Our view is that this is primarily a high school activity. And if you feel like your 12-year-old is mature enough to handle that, then by all means, you're the parent. But just know that it is going to be high school level content.
That's great. Appreciate that, Christy. I know we have this great intensive next week where students are going to get to take all of the things they've learned here in the summit, and they're going to use practical activities and start processing through this information, particularly in our 3-day debate track. So can you just talk to that practice round at the end of that session, Christy? Should students already be prepared with the case and evidence, or can they come and learn material there and then practice with that?
They do not have to come with a case and evidence and material. We will provide that for them. We have a case already written that they can use, and we have a negative brief for that side that they can already use. We're going to be going over it during the intensive. They're also going to have the opportunity to watch a debate round using that sample case that we've already taped ahead of time. So they're going to see an example of what debate is like using that same case and evidence that they will be able to use at the intensive as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And let's finish with this one because I know this is a real issue for a lot of our families. My high schooler has a heavy academic load this year. How many hours per week would you say are necessary for participation? And can we tailor this to fit the needs of our family?
Yes, for sure. You can do that. You just have to put some limits on it because you could spend 20 hours a week, but you just got to time box that. I would say you could do it if you really started in September researching every week. Easily 5 hours a week would be plenty. Even like 2 hours a week, if you were really faithful, would be sufficient. What do you think, Brenda?
I think that's a great place, to start. I think you are going to get out of it what you put into it. And with a heavy course like that, those boundaries are going to be important. You'll also want to calculate in your club time and working with your other club team members as well. And that can count towards those hours as well. So I think a couple hours a week, it could certainly do it. But definitely you could spend as much time on this as you wanted to spend on it. So there is, you know, an amount that will work for almost anybody.
That's great. Well, ladies, I just so want to thank you for being here today. I love your passion for this activity and just for what it can do in our families. I do want to invite all of you to check out the NCFCA Comprehensive Guide to Teen Policy Debate. That will help you whether you're just getting started in your home or whether you're going to use that with one of your local clubs as well. And then if you have not already done so, check out www.ncfca.org/intensive and learn about the event next week where your students can really get that hands-on practical experience with policy debate. So Christy and Brenda, thank you. And to everyone else, we hope to see you back at 3 p.m. when Mr. Gregory Remke will take us through this year's resolution. So he's going to do a deep dive. You're going to gain lots of great information to get started on the year. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.